All right, good. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining, or good evening, or wherever you might be. It's early morning here in California. Appreciate you, and I want to thank Dasa for giving me the opportunity to talk today. I want to thank you for joining today. I'm Larry Apke. I'm not going to go a whole lot into my history. I've been involved in Agile for about a dozen years, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. I'm going to talk a little bit about today about what I call the Golden Rule of Agile, focus on value delivery, which is actually a book that I've written and published recently. And hopefully you all will find some value in it over the next half hour or so as I go on and present that to you. I don't know if you folks have cameras that you can turn on, but if you don't, that's fine too. But it'd be great to be able to see people because I know you can see me. If you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A. I'll try to get to them as quickly as possible. And we'll get started this morning. So I want to tell a little bit of story about where this Golden Rule of Agile came from. And I think it's interesting because I kind of kick myself that I didn't come up with it sooner. I came up with it probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago, when I was well on my way of coaching and working at a bunch of different places, names that you probably know, helping them to transform in Agile. And one of the things that kept running through my mind as I'm doing this, I don't know, you probably aren't familiar, but the first book I wrote was a series of 16 blog posts on the Agile Manifesto, the 4 values and 12 principles. So it's very near and dear to my heart. But I found, as a lot of you probably find, that a lot of folks have trouble with adhering to those 4 values and 12 principles within corporate America or corporate wherever, I suppose. My experience obviously being mostly in the States. And I kind of asked myself a question, being familiar with the story from my childhood. I was born and raised, and my mom always said, don't talk about religion and politics much in mixed company. But I do want to tell a story about when I was growing up as a Catholic and going to Sunday school, and they taught you the stories in the Bible. There was one in particular called the Golden Rule. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, basically there were 10 commandments in the Old Testament of the Bible that were given to Moses, and Moses came down with the 10 commandments and said, "Thou shalt not do this and that and the other." But the folks weren't doing a very good job with it, and it was a problem, right? And this is important stuff. I mean, we talk about Agile and 16, 4 values and 12 principles. That's 16 things. That's much more than 10. And the 16 things that behind Agile, probably not as important as the 10 things behind the 10 commandments, because we're talking about kind of your everlasting soul. So I thought about that, and I thought, well, what happened later on is in the New Testament, Jesus comes down and says, well, you guys are having some problems with 10. And it makes sense, really, if you pay any attention to science at all. Human beings are 7 plus or minus 2 in short-term memory. So, 10 is more than that. And so folks weren't doing a good job. And so he said, basically, I'm going to give you 2. I'm going to boil it down to 2 things. And those 2 things were basically, I believe, if somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, have no God above me. And the second one, which we refer to as the Golden Rule, which is treat others as the way that you wish to be treated. And I thought that's a pretty good encapsulation of the 10 commandments. And 2 things is a heck of a lot easier to remember than 10, right? And so being a fan of the 4 values and 12 principles, I can do simple math, even though I went to public school. That's 16. We're having a hard time remembering these 4 values and 12 principles because it's just too much for us as human beings. And if we can't remember 10 commandments, which is really important, how are we going to remember 16 values and principles of Agile? So I sat down and I asked myself a very simple question. If I were to put something together that would adhere to this concept of having maybe one statement that is easier to remember, that would encapsulate all of the 4 values and 12 principles, what would it be? And that became a thought experiment. I played around with that for some time. And I finally came up with it. And I'm going to explain it to you in a second. I'm going to show you what it is. It's not a big deal. But the other thing about this that was important, I talk about this in the book, is I call it Apke's Golden Rule of Agile. And folks think that I did that because I'm egotistical. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. I think maybe I could be egotistical, but I wanted to let folks know that this is my perception. There is no golden rule of Agile. So if I just called it the Golden Rule of Agile, I think people might be led astray. This is my opinion. So that's why it was called Apke's Golden Rule of Agile as opposed to just the Golden Rule of Agile. And so the question became, okay, what would it be? And this is what I came up with. We deliver the optimal value to our customers in the shortest time possible. And here's the interesting thing about it. It's not perfect. I don't think anyone could come up with a perfect golden rule of Agile. But I think it's close. And it wasn't that this was perfect, but it became useful over time. Because what I did, which a lot of folks do, and I don't know if you're familiar with some of the other things I've written on LinkedIn, is I'm going to go out in public. Because if you want to know whether something is good or not, take it out to the public and they're going to let you know. And generally, they're going to be pretty critical of what you do. I don't know if any of you post on LinkedIn, but you're going to get a lot of feedback. And that feedback is generally negative. And that's fine. I mean, I wanted to put it out there to the world, let the folks kick the tires, so to speak, and find out if there's any value in this. So I did. And unlike some other posts that I've posted on LinkedIn or you know, spoken in public or something like that, I didn't get a whole lot of pushback. There weren't a whole lot of comments. There weren't a whole lot of people saying, this is awful. Why would you do this? Blah, blah, blah. So I thought maybe there's something there. And so what I decided to do at the time, I was working for a fairly large telecom company that most probably recognize. I started incorporating it into my training. And I don't know if you folks are familiar with my training at all, but if I'm known for anything in the Agile community, I started a nonprofit called the Job Hackers. I taught a class that we referred to as the Agile MBA for 7 years to over 4,000 people in over 50 countries. And if you're not familiar with it, the Job Hackers is still a viable nonprofit. They still teach a version of the Agile MBA that I created. It's not mine, but it's similar. And they continue to do that 4 times a year. So if any of you are interested, it's free. It always has been free, and always, as far as I know, will be free. So I started teaching it both at this large telecom that I was working at, and also in my Agile, quote unquote, Agile MBA class. And I found that it helped me to present to the people what Agile was about. Not, again, it's not perfect, but I found it to be useful. And I want to explain briefly why it's useful to me and how it helped my practice. And this is in the book. And for those of you who are interested, don't go rush off and buy the book. I've got a QR code, and I'll share it with you, and you can download it for free if you're interested in reading the whole story of the whole book. Here's what's useful about Apke's Golden Rule of Agile. Excuse me. We deliver the optimal value to our customers in the shortest time possible. If we adhere to this golden rule, then we really only need to know 3 things in order to be successful, or not just successful, but optimal. And those 3 things are: we need to know our customer, which is obviously a very agile value or principle, considering the first 2 principles of the manifesto speak directly about the customer. We need to know what they find valuable. And then we need to know how long will it take to deliver that value. And this sounds really simplistic. In fact, I'm almost embarrassed at how simplistic it is. But interestingly enough, in your experiences might be the same. But in a lot of organizations, we don't adhere to this. We forget about the customer frequently, or we forget about value. Now, the interesting thing is, in most organizations, they do keep track of time because it's easy to measure is one of the reasons. The other reason is because we have this delusion that by working harder in knowledge work, we're going to deliver more value. So we divorce the concept of value and we assume that time spent equates to value. It does not. I think most of you realize that. And that's why, again, it's so, to me, simple. But we forget it often. In fact, when I started my journey here in California, I'm from Ohio originally, then I lived in Arizona for 25 years. Not that that's important, but when I came up to California, it was to work for a very well-known company, a company that was at one point in time, the highest capitalized business in the world. And when I worked with their software development teams, we never talked about value. They never talked about value. When I started coming in, I started talking about value. I thought it was important because we should know the value of the things that we do. So when we're taking this golden rule, the two things that I concentrate on is I'm going to assume in a lot of cases, you're going to have a product owner, and we're going to rely heavily on that product owner to understand the customer. In fact, if we're smart enough, that's probably the easiest part. I know it doesn't sound like it, but it's the easiest part. The hardest part is this concept of value and also time. So those of you who are familiar with SAFe or anything else, what I'm really talking about in this statement is something similar to WSJF, which is weighted shortest job first. And so one of the things I found is that I have this technique. And for those of you who are interested in technique, I mean, I don't think it's revolutionary. I don't think I'm the only one doing it. In fact, I thought I kind of invented it, and then I did some research and found out that I didn't. I don't know if any of you have run into that in the past where you think you've invented something, then you find out later you haven't. But there's a very simple relative estimation exercise that I do with all my teams, that I do with all the organizations I work for. And it's not only the interesting thing for me is I've done it hundreds and hundreds of times with hundreds of teams over the years. I love doing it. And the teams, we basically, for those of you interested, I encourage you to visit my YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. Larry Apke is the YouTube channel, I believe. And the nice thing is, if you type my name correct in any search engine, especially on YouTube, you're going to find me because there are no other Larry Apkes in the world, to my knowledge. And you can go through that exercise. You can watch me do it with the training that I do. And basically all we do, for those of you who are interested, is we take everything that could be done for our product and we put it in a backlog, and that's not unusual or controversial. And we put it on over to the left here on a virtual board or a real board back in the days when we worked in the same location. And we just move things over in relative size or, time. A lot of folks do that, right? And we call those story points usually. And it's very controversial. And to me, it's not. I think you should know relative time of what it would take to deliver something of value. In fact, when I'm doing my training, I always say, look, if you take your car to the shop, you're going to ask the mechanic at least 2, if not 3 things, right? The technical people are going to want to know what's wrong. But everybody, even if you're not technical, is going to ask 2 things. How much does it cost to fix? And how long is it going to take? And we should, in the world of Agile, be able to answer those questions for our stakeholders. So I'm not a big fan of no estimates because I think we have to. The question is, can we do a better job? So this relative estimation exercise, which I don't have time for in a short talk, I encourage you to go check out. The thing that's a little bit more, I don't know if it's controversial or whatever, is I encourage my teams to do the same thing for value. meaning we're going to take everything that we could do from the backlog, we're going to put it on a board, and we're going to put things in relative value. And then we end up giving numeric values to both the time and the value. And what this does for us is now we know, assuming that our estimates are correct, and we have to, but we can change them at any time. We can start to sequence the work. And this is the word that I like to use that I don't hear enough in the Agile world, is sequence the work. We have to do things in a sequence. We do one thing, then another thing, then another thing, then another thing. Now, we can batch things together in a larger batch, which we don't want to have too large a batch, because the larger the batch, the longer it takes to move through the system. So we want to make sure that we spend so much, I'm going to back up a second. We spend so much time trying to do things right that we forget that it's more important to do the right things. So I would say 90% or more of the folks who do some estimation in the world of Agile are doing it wrong. And I don't like to use the word wrong. I'm just doing that to be provocative. Really, it's just suboptimal, right? There's no good or bad in the world. There's just, this one's better and this one's not. Because the reason we want to do estimations on our work of both value and time is because we need to know what we should do. What is the right thing to do now? And so all of these arguments about no estimates and how we do estimates and whether we should use a Fibonacci sequence and all this, that's a red herring. It means absolutely nothing. It is completely tangential to the real reason we do estimations, which is what should we do to deliver the most value in the shortest time possible, which is Apke's Golden Rule. And so what you can do, sequence then becomes very, very critical to what we do, because again, a lot of folks are asking, what do we do? When are we going to get it? If you have a fully sequenced backlog, and by fully sequenced backlog, I mean a rank order backlog, meaning that if you have 10 items, you have number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And you decide to do things in that order. If you take that sequence of a backlog and you take your ability to move and deliver things from that backlog to your customers, which we refer to oftentimes as velocity, then what you've really created is you've created a form of schedule. It's not a schedule that you're going to stick to. It's a schedule of what's possible in the future. Because the key to agility is that we can change. Not that we run fast, but that when we run into an obstacle, we can change. Or if we run into an opportunity, we can pursue it. So I want you to imagine a fully sequenced backlog. I want you to imagine, I know that, let's say, for instance, we're measuring velocity. We can measure by story points or value points, or we can measure it by time or numbers. Let's just say I've got 100 items, and I know I can do 10 things each sprint, or whatever the time period you choose, right? If you're not using Scrum, whatever the time frame. Obviously, I can start to look at the future and say, this is what I'm capable of doing over time. But here's the agility, though. Something new happens. What do? I put it on the backlog. I give it value. I give it effort, right? Relative value, relative effort. I give it a sequence. And what have I done? I've changed the schedule. I've changed my ability to deliver work over time. This is agility. I can take advantage of new opportunities. I can take advantage of new information, and I'm not fixed on the schedule. So when I use this word schedule, I want you to understand I'm talking about what can we do, as opposed to what will we do, because what we will do can change over time. And then it starts to become really, really powerful. Because not only can we measure velocity in terms of, as I mentioned before, story points, which is really a measure of kind of capacity of the team or the system to move work through the system, we can start to measure value delivered. And this changes everything, by the way, because what I found in so many ways, this is really kind of the golden rule, is we want to deliver as much value as we can in the shortest amount of time. We can't start doing that until we start measuring the value that we're doing. And there's so few teams that are doing it. Part of the reason for that, by the way, most of you know, is we tend to take a project-centric approach to product management. We say, here's the scope of things that we want. Here's what it costs. Here's the value if we deliver this whole big chunk of stuff. And then we forget about the value statement. And this, by the way, is another thing that's a real huge hit with the teams, is when you start to measure the value of the work that people deliver, they become more engaged in their work. I don't know if you're all familiar with the Gallup organization poll that talks about employee engagement. It's about 1 in 3 workers in the United States, and I think it's similar in Europe, and I think most of you all are from Europe, the United States. 1 in 3 are engaged in their work. 2 in 3 are disengaged in their work. Why are they disengaged in their work? Because of many factors, but one of them is they don't see the value of what they deliver. If we adhere to this golden rule of Agile, where we're really disciplined in understanding the value of the work that we deliver, and we're very disciplined in sequencing the work to deliver the most value in the shortest amount of time, then we have that engagement from the people doing the work, and the work is better. The quality of the work is better. So one of the things that really robs us of the ability to follow Apke's golden rule of Agile is that we take a project-centric funding model and a project-centric approach to products, because I'm talking primarily about software, right? This is what we're here for. This is a DevOps conference. We're talking about software generally. And it's the software that we need to deliver. The whole reason that DevOps exists, by the way, is to reduce the time that it takes to deliver value to our customers. That's why most of you are here. So that's Apke's golden rule of Agile. I will take, I don't see a whole bunch of things in the chat or the questions, but I did want to take some time to respond to any of them, if you have any. And I also wanted to give you the opportunity to, if you're interested in going a little bit further and deeper and understanding the whys and the hows and how we can do it. And I show examples in the book with backlogs and stuff. It's, I think, a very practical, probably my most practical book. I have 3 books out there now. You can snap up this QR code and you can go to the website. You should be able to enter your name and an email address, and it's going to automatically send you a copy of the book so you can see. But I want to kind of put a little bit of conclusion on my talk here, because it's interesting for me to try to give a talk, for just a half hour is a little bit tougher than an hour. What I've found, and this is at, companies where you'll know the name, the amount of effort that we expend in trying to figure out how to do things right is way out of proportion to figuring out how to do the right things. The amount of effort that we exert to understand and estimate what we're capable of delivering over time far exceeds the amount of time that we're spending to understand the value of the things that we deliver over time. And that's why the kind of subtitle, subtext of the book is a focus on value delivery. And these are, like I said, these are not ideas that other folks haven't proposed in the world of Agile. WSJF, weighted shortest job first, is a version of that. It's a much more simplified version of that. I don't know if anybody has seen my, take on SAFe. Some of you might be proponents. I'm not a big fan because they made WSJF so complicated that most teams won't do it. I go into organizations that do SAFe and they don't do WSJF anymore because they said it was just too complicated. What I'm proposing is much simpler. And because it's much simpler, it's much more effective. And the other thing I guess I want to talk about is when we talk about stories in the world of Agile, stories were meant to be something that provided value to the customer. That's kind of gone by the wayside. So generally, when I'm working with teams, we're not talking about a story backlog, though we can do this effort on a story backlog, the value and effort estimation stuff. But I'm talking about a feature backlog. And I'm going to define a feature as this: the smallest unit of value we could deliver to our customers is a feature. So I'll wrap up with that, because I do have some questions, and I'll try to answer those quickly. And if you want to put some more questions in the Q&A, that's fine. Looks like Mutha asked, Golden Rule of Agile started. I'm assuming the question is, when did I start publishing this, and when did I start using it? I started using it probably about 2.5 years ago. I think the book was published sometime late last year, maybe like October, November of 2023, if I remember correctly. Gloria says, in order to estimate the value, are you using the Moscow technique? No, I'm not. The Moscow, for those of you who must have, should have, could have, would like to have. And are you involving the customer in estimating it? So the technique that I have, I encourage you, it's a relative estimation size. It's called affinity estimation. And basically, as I explained in the video, and I encourage you to go look at the video, we're just going to take everything, we're going to put it in relative size. So there's two things that we're going to do with two different groups, by the way. And I didn't mention this before, so I'll do it briefly. The one group is the folks who are doing the work. We know that. That's the effort estimation part. So we're going to take everything that we could do that's in the backlog, and we're going to ask people who know what it would take in terms of effort, obviously, to put it in relative size, is what I usually refer to it as. We're going to take a second group of people who understand the customer concerns. That's usually the product owner and product managers and people who understand what the customer's understanding of value, and we're going to do that same exercise. So you end up with two different numeric values for that particular piece of work. Different groups doing it. The interesting thing about it is this technique is very, very powerful. It's also fast. So when I do this technique, the record is 140 backlog items in an hour. You can go through it very quickly. The second question from Gloria was, is the customer involved in estimating it? It would be great if you could get the customer involved in doing that work. It usually doesn't happen, which is why you have a proxy anyway. In most places, they'll set up a product owner as a proxy to understand the customer's wants, needs, and desires. If you can find a way to do it and involve customers, especially ones who are really important, man, that'd be awesome, right? It's going to be much better for your company in terms of delivering value. One of the things that I've always wanted to do was set up a futures market and have our customers work in that futures market to give them their ideas. So there are ways that you can get input into the thing, but the actual ceremony or technique or event or whatever you want to call it is done usually during what we call backlog refinement, and usually the customer is not involved. Okay, I really appreciate y'all being here. I really do. I hope that this very short half hour was a good use of your time. And I encourage you all. I love doing this. I'm very passionate about doing this. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. You have questions, you want to send me a message or something like that, please feel free to do it. I'll certainly link into you, and I'll be happy to help in any way that I can. I wish you all the best, and I hope you have a wonderful day.